Hello everyone and welcome back to another fantastic episode of Talking the PS, your weekly PlayStation show where we round up all of the gaming and PlayStation news for your listening or viewing pleasure right here on youtube.com/Helix Plays Games and up there in the digital clouds on your podcast preference of choice. You're joining myself, Chris, this week alongside my troublesome two. Joining me first, Richie, welcome back.
Hello everyone.
Welcome back, hello indeed. And below him, the ever-returning Chaotic Neutral with his chaotic audio issues last week, decimating the show's soundtrack. Rob, welcome back.
Oh, was it that bad? Was it that bad? Never mind.
We tried to fix. Apologies for last week's show, everyone. We tried to fix it in the moment, after the moment, in post, and shit happens. Shit happens. We actually realised as well on last week's ClickerCast episode, our weekly Last of Us roundup show, that my microphone didn't mute every time I hit mute and coughed. So apologies, anyone listening to that, thinking you've contracted something through my coughing via the airwaves. But hopefully we are back. We've got a great show lined up for you this week, rounding up all your PlayStation news. And what a show and what a week for PlayStation it is. But before we get into all that, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and click that bell so you're kept in the loop with all of that great content. As I mentioned, the ClickerCast, usually we say it's up live with us, me and Richie, tonight, 8 p.m. UK time. However,
You've already missed it.
They snuck it in early. We actually recorded it and went live this past Sunday because of the Super Bowl over in the United States. Of course, nothing gets in the way of the Super Bowl, not even The Last of Us. So we got an early episode this past week. Episode 5, Endure and Survive, is available now, and our review is also up on the channel. So go check that out if you've been watching The Last of Us. We'd appreciate it. And speaking of video games and appreciation, if you head over to the rest of the channel, we've also got our Hogwarts Legacy First Look up on the channel, which we're actually going to get into quite a lot anyway. I've played it, Rob's watched it, Richie hasn't got it, so we'll get into all that. And of course, we also played Halo for the first time. I know this is a PlayStation podcast, but you cannot deny Halo's magnificence in the video game industry. That's up as well. And we'd love you to join us this Thursday because we play with you, the awesome community, every Thursday here on Helix Plays Games. Gentlemen, let's get into it because we've got a busy show to talk about and get into. Before we get to Hogwarts Legacy, that's what I've been playing. That's our kind of big starting topic point. Richie, anything you've been playing on PlayStation this week?
On PlayStation, just a bit more of Last of Us. I kind of went through yesterday on XPass I'm just dabbling a bit with a couple of different games at the moment. I've jumped back into Pokemon. I've got Last of Us on the go, which I'm intentionally playing behind the TV show. So I'm basically a chapter or half a chapter behind where the show is. Quite a unique way to experience the game because then when I'm jumping back into the game, I'm noticing the differences. I've got FIFA on the go at the moment, but I'm also building a guitar at the moment, so that's taking some of my time.
Guitar Simulator?
No, an actual real world guitar.
I don't think that's an actual game.
No, it's not. Actual guitar could be a game.
Someone will get to it. When they run out of simulator games, they'll get to it. How about yourself, Rob? What have you been dabbling in between work this week?
I've been observing Harry Potter secondhand, and that's been basically as close as I've got to the PlayStation this week. It's been it's such a good role reversal. All I can think of is I might want to watch this on TV, and it's nope.
So your girlfriend, she's one who straight up says she loves games but doesn't like to play them usually. She prefers to watch people.
Yeah, it's a really nice dynamic where she loves the stories and watching a game secondhand, but just doesn't particularly like to play them. But that just does not apply to Hogwarts Legacy. So I've been taking the back seat a little bit, really.
It's an interesting dynamic when the other half kind of takes a vested interest in your hobby, but you actually have no real ownership in it anywhere. Where do you sit on the Harry Potter scale of Wizarding World interest anywhere? Is it one of your favourite franchises, or are you kind of...
I like the books, and there's certain elements of the kind of the universe that interests me, but it's never been one that's kind of pulled me into an obsessive level other ones have. I'll have my own playthrough of Hogwarts Legacy at some point, but just
not anytime soon.
Not anytime in the next 12 months probably.
So this kind of goes back to my next question. Video games need to, and hopefully through cloud gaming or streaming or something, we can get to a world where you can play multiple versions of a copy of a game across multiple devices. Because I think as gaming gets bigger and bigger, obviously a TV show, you would just sit down as a family, a collective, friends, whatever, and you would just observe and watch it together, and you'd revel, you'd laugh, you'd cry, you'd do all that stuff. With a video game, it's a very like intimate one-on-one experience, especially if it's a single player. And I've done it. I've played through multiple things with the wife where we kind of take turns. But it is interesting to think that there's no real outlet for, if you both want it at the same time, aside from purchasing an entirely separate console and another copy of the game with a separate TV. It is a case of sharing and taking turns.
Yeah, and even so, if you do that, it breaks down like the joint experience you have, because you both just sat elsewhere playing the game, and it's like after 3 hours you go and like check in on each other, like, oh, have you done this bit yet? And it's like, no, I haven't. It's like a weird way to do it.
It is. I've seen a couple of people this week where one of the family members are playing Hogwarts Legacy on the big screen, and another person is playing the Metroid remaster on the Nintendo Switch, because that got shadow dropped this week, which was awesome. And you can just see someone chilling back on the couch with the Switch, and someone in the background playing Hogwarts Legacy, and the kids are playing Minecraft on whatever. And you just think like, oh, what a perfectly blissful scenario, but at the same time that would just not work in my household either. It's like, no, I need to have the big TV to play it, or I'll wait. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Have you been drawn into the Wizarding world at all, Richie, then? Is Hogwarts Legacy at all on your radar? Are you just like, nah, fuck Harry Potter, fuck Dumbledore, like that all?
It actually is on my radar, and with how well it's reviewing, I'm looking at prices at the moment. Like, I am seriously quite tempted by this game, because as I said, nothing's really hooking me at the moment. And I do like Harry Potter. I've read all the books, I read the movies.
You read the movies?
How do you do that?
Yeah, I read the movies. Yeah, I am.
Download the script Potter, online.
No, I watched all the movies. I didn't really have that much interest in like the spin-off stuff, like the Cursed Child and the Magical Beast stuff. I kind of felt like once like Harry's story was done, I was kind of okay, I'm done with that. Well, I can see the appeal of expanding the universe. And I actually think expanding the universe through games suits me more than through movies that seem to be mixed in terms of how well they went. So I'm tempted.
That's a perfect jumping off point, Richie. So we'll get into the main bulk of the show then, because that is our first story, is Hogwarts Legacy's first impression. So Rob, if you could introduce us to the
properly prepared PlayStation perusing points, aka The news.
Any video listeners out there, apologies, because I realised I had to bring in the news introduction, the little kind of visual aid that comes up. And we've all done this before, when on a Windows computer, you move or you press something and every window disappears, shuts down.
Okay. So you can't do things on Windows.
I don't know what happened then, but I went to basically grab my mouse cursor, which has been dormant for the last 10 minutes, and every window, OBS, Discord, Chrome, just disappeared just to my wallpaper background. So you won't be able to see the fear on my face, thinking I've just immediately lost everything. But it was there. I assure you, it was there in the darkness. And we're back now. I've had to open the windows up. But yes, all that just from the news. Anyway, everyone, as I said, we've got a great show. And our news every week is brought to you by our Helix Heroes, the wonderful folks who support the channel that extra bit more, like 50 of you do, over on youtube.com. By hitting join below, you can become one of those Helix Heroes for special access to early content like this very show, stickers and badges next to your name and super chat, and of course, Richie's ever-endearing love. And if you check out this week's XPass, he offers a little bit more at some higher tiers, so definitely go watch that and check that one out. I wanted a special shout out to our newest Helix hero, Daniel Bosserman, as well, the boss man himself, for joining up on the bronze tier. We appreciate you, sir. Thank you indeed. All right, let's get back to the Wizarding world. We mentioned there, Richie, you're kind of maybe shopping around, looking at it, seeing what it is, if it's going to tickle your fancy as such. And to give my first impressions, the first looks up on the channel, so if you want a bit more insight into it, definitely go check that out. The best part you mentioned there, which kind of triggered it for me, is that I appreciate Harry Potter world, the games, the books, the TV series. Love playing Chamber of Secrets back in the day on the PS1. I enjoyed the Harry Potter Lego games, but we've not really had any entries in the video game, like AAA world, since the PlayStation 1 2 for me, as far as this world is concerned. And I genuinely think the best thing they did for this is set it before all that. This place takes place in the 1800s, so you're talking hundreds of years before the events of Harry Potter and He Who Shall Not Be Named. And immediately when the game starts and there's this kind of like hip hip hooray, pippy pippy British person, and they're on like the streets of London back in the 1800s, and they're all dressed to the nines in kind of all their tailcoats and whatnot. And immediately I was like, yes, I'm so far detached from the modern sensibilities of the movies and the books. I'm in. The school's still there. It exists because it's obviously hundreds, thousands of years old, whatever. The wizards still exist. They just don't have kind of TVs and cars and the same kind of... Humans are so far behind wizards at this point. It lends for such a really good concept. And the introduction to the actual video game, which I didn't know because I've been quite radio silent on the content, is that you start as basically a 50th year student who's invited to Hogwarts. The game literally opens on your letter from Hogwarts to say you've been invited along by deputy head teacher Weasley. Which straight away I was like, okay, you got my intrigue now. So there's Weasley's great-great-great-grandmother or something is deputy head teacher at Hogwarts. So that had my intrigue. And then, yeah, you get your letter and you create your character. But, yeah, you're a 50th year student who's never been to school before, but you've been called upon to basically invited to the school as a 50th year student. So you've missed out on the first 4 years of Hogwarts, and you've been basically brought in as a fifth-term student. Which again lends for an interesting premise. Who am I? Who's my character? Why have I been called on?
Who am I?
Who am I? And rather than go through your traditional route of getting on the train and going there, you've basically been given kind of like a steward who's one of the teachers at the school to bring you up to speed for fifth year as like private tutoring. And yeah, shit pops off, something happens, you do end up at the school to be sorted into your house. And playing through the first hour, it teaches you some of the basics, introduce you to the world, the kind of setting. And after I finished for an hour, I was like, that was a good introduction to a video game, let alone a Wizarding World kind of inspired Harry Potter video game. And yeah, the first hour just had me wanting for more. So yeah, I think Rob, is there any kind of, obviously you viewed it rather than played it. Mm-hmm. What are your perceptions of the game so far? Your first impressions from a distance?
So here's a crazy thing. Okay, so when the game dropped at midnight on whatever day early access came out, mm-hmm. I'd already went to bed, and then so my girlfriend played like the first like hour and a half, 2 hours of the game mm-hmm. by herself, and then I kind of caught up the next day, and like I knew it was set before the Harry Potter area. I did not know it was set in the 1800s.
Right.
Like that's news to me. Apparently, like just on this show now. But like the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. But I do agree. Like the best thing they could have done was like just get rid of any modern sensibilities to the game, because like the trouble with Harry Potter is like when you start to think too much about it, it all starts to just not make sense. It's like why
are the wizards not using modern technology even though they exist now?
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like they obviously use a phone. Like an email is still more efficient than an owl. Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
especially when they're trying to blend in and kind of not be like someone like sending a message via owl, go, that guy's a wizard.
Yeah, it's like someone's like rung you up on the phone to say like, oh, I've sent you an owl with a message. Like, can you just tell me now? It's like whatever.
Yeah.
But so that's perfect. And the briefest of 20 minutes I got to actually walk around as my girlfriend's character, like the world is just so like engrossing, and it's like there's stuff going on like kind of in every room, and like the map's fucking huge. So like, and I think the best way like my girlfriend described it is like it's a very kind of comforting experience being in like the Hogwarts world or something, I guess. So
it does feel like you are actually in that world, so mm-hmm. which is kind of what you want from this game. Like, it's an RPG set in Hogwarts. You kind of want it to be an RPG set in Hogwarts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And it does kind of... My desire to play it has went up massively since experiencing it kind of secondhand.
For me, it was lending on that concept of everyone has all these like worlds and franchises, and I don't think we've ever had an open world area that lends itself to it so faithfully to the source material. Mm-hmm. So like we've had like I said in the first look as well, we've had like Lord of the Rings games, we've had Marvel games and stuff, but you never really just left to your own devices to explore those worlds. Like we don't like. I think I tweeted out the other day about like why haven't we got a Game of Thrones RPG? Like I would love to just wander around Westeros, but it was like a map the size of The Witcher 3, and yet that doesn't exist. We don't have like an RTS game like that either, and it's crazy that these worlds are so rich in source material and just locations and characters that you don't even have to know. And I think that's what works well. You rewind the time, you set it in a place where all the locations, like King's Cross Station, still exists. The train still exists. Hogsmeade, Hogwarts, the Gringotts Bank, it all still exists because it's thousands of years old. We just don't need to attach ourselves to these three pissy teenagers who are starting school and follow their journey. We can just do our own thing through the lens of this, like the locations, and that's at the end of the day, like that's all these worlds that we love so much, like Middle Earth and Star Wars and everything. It's the worlds more so than the characters in a lot of it, and this is great.
Do you know what you kind of reminded me of? Jedi Fallen Order in a weird way, where you are this character, you are playing in that world of Star Wars, but it's detached enough from the main canon that it feels like the story has room to do its own thing. Like, you don't have... Well, you can't do that because Luke's about. It doesn't have that kind of thing. This seems similar. It's like, you detach... Yes, this is distinctly... You can recognise this is the Wizarding World, this is Hogwarts, but you're detached enough from the main storyline of Harry Potter that there's room for them to tell their own story the way they want to without breaking canon.
Yeah. That's the thing. Having, like, creative flexibility is, like, such an important thing when you taking on a franchise like this. So
it really is, and there's enough Easter eggs.
Whether I want to buy this game,
you do.
I am very, very tempted.
There's enough Easter eggs as well to do it. So like the head teacher.
I didn't realize they're set over Easter. Easter eggs set over
Oh,
Easter.
right, okay. I was thinking, what did I just say? Like the Harry Potter wise. But yeah, in terms of the locations, like the head teacher isn't Dumbledore. It's a character played by Simon Pegg, who does a very non-Simon Pegg voice as well. You wouldn't be able to tell it was him if you didn't know.
Is it the surname Black as well?
The surname's Black, yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, so there's enough like sprinkled in. There's ghosts around the halls. Obviously, all of the common rooms are the same as the houses you get put in. The Sorting Hat sounds exactly like the Sorting Hat. So as soon as he's popped on your head and he starts kind of judging you internally, it's like, oh, I'm back in this world and I'm living my kind of best Harry Potter life without
I am right
Daniel
in saying
Radcliffe.
that you can be sorted into any of the four houses.
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed by that because I kind of went into it thinking I was going to be peppered with like a Pottermore quiz level of like, let's find out who you belong to. And it was like 2 questions and then he put me in a house and it went, do you really want to be in this house or do you want to pick another one? I was like, okay. So it didn't force me into what house I wanted to be in. I did go into it thinking I wanted to be Gryffindor and I might have changed my mind by the end. So the Sorting Hat may have sorted me different. You'll have to watch the first look to find out.
Anything but Hufflepuff.
You know what? I want to see you, Rob, do a full Slytherin playthrough, but straight up commit to the evil.
The first thing I tried to do when I got the controller was like sap a student, and you can't attack students.
So to pivot, I guess, from the world and the characters to the combat as well. That was one of the things. I haven't done much combat yet. However, the kind of introductory tutorial part, you kind of fight these kind of like Stone Guardian people. It's just a setup area, and it's quite seamless. Like you have like tap R2 to do your quick wizard whip things that like blast stuff. You have shield, which is just triangle. So like if someone comes to attack you, kind of Batman style, you press triangle to create like a bubble aura Gandalf around you, and that kind of blocks them, and you can parry if you time it right. And like you do have like casting spells for like exploration and revealing things, and your little torch Lumos at the end of your wand. And I can see as the game kind of progresses on, I'm going to unlock new abilities and spells, and essentially there are potions, as you can imagine. And I just think this world lends itself to a video game so well in terms of what you can do as a character, what the world can do in terms of telling stories, and then the locations as well. It almost builds and makes me wonder, like, how has this not been done sooner?
Yeah, 100%.
And it's going to have
made
that
Harry
behind
Potter games in the past, but they're always stuck strict to the story of the movie that they're adapting. And I think sometimes that works really well. Other times I think it doesn't work well. Where I think sometimes them sort of games, because there's so many different mechanics you have to throw in to kind of follow the beat of the movie, nothing's ever done well. Everything's kind of done okay at best.
Yeah.
So there can be good experiences, but this sounds like a proper RPG. We know how this wants to play. We're going to build the story. We know the story we want to tell. I think I'm buying this game, guys.
Yeah.
If both of you are basically telling me to buy this game, I think I need to buy this game.
Yeah, and like from like looking at the more kind of advanced combat, if you want to call it that, like the chaining mechanic is really nice as well. It's not just a case of like, you zap a spell and I zap a spell and then you zap a spell and then one of us dies. It's like there's kind of fluidity to it. Yeah. Like Ron's mum when she like kills all those people in the later movies.
Murks them all. If you ever needed a real selling point, Richie, on the PS5, on the DualSense, when you pick your house, your controller glows the colour of your house.
Oh.
So
that might act... and I know it's stupid, but that might lead me more to buying this on PS5 than Xbox. Also, actually, to be fair, I am leaning more towards PS5 than Xbox, but that's more because my PS5 is... Well, I'm going to get better performance out of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But yeah,
is there anything else you'd like to know so far? I've only played like an hour and a half, 2 hours, so...
What's the character builder like? Is it deep customization, or is it just like pick a boy or girl?
It's not. It's in the middle. So the initial default person who was there pretty much looked like me almost anyway. I had like a slight quiff over of hair. I got rid of some freckles. I put a scar through my eyebrow. I was going to go through the one I've got at the top of my eyebrow thanks to your loft door at your parents' house, Richie, but they didn't quite have as detailed scar addition as that, so I just went one right through my eye. Yeah.
Can your character have a beard?
No, because they're all kids.
Yeah, fair.
Which I didn't think about until that moment you just said. Then I was like, no, but they are all supposed to be like what, 12, 13 years old, if that. So, I mean, we all went to school with that one.
At Hogwarts, and it's like,
I mean, we did all go to school with that one person who had far too like hairy arms and facial hair in like year 6, year 5.
The worst is when you see just a kid. It just like it's got a terrible mustache, and it's like, mate, shave.
You're 10-year-old. I get you're trying to impress people.
You're not ready for that. You're not ready for that yet.
Porno stash.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I've enjoyed it. I couldn't play it straight away because I had work over the weekend, but. Yeah, I was really looking forward to getting into it, and as soon as we're kind of wrapped up with these shows this week, I'll definitely be playing some more. So
I might, if time allows, give you my first impressions last Sunday on the ClickerCast.
Last Sunday? You just confused me with some kind of like time.
Well, it's now Tuesday, we're in the future, but we haven't recorded ClickerCast. We're recording ClickerCast tonight, but this doesn't go out till Tuesday.
I'm still confused. I need some kind of like...
I'm thinking about buying and playing this game in between finishing recording this and recording ClickerCast.
Okay,
tonight.
right. I need some kind of Hermione's time thing to go back and reassess and watch this. If there's a small Chris behind me somewhere on these shelves who's just watching everything unfold, and he needs to correct the timeline. That could be part of the story. I don't know. We digress. But yes, that has been our first impressions of Hogwarts Legacy. Obviously, it's doing really well out there in the wider world, reviewing quite well. It is getting some bad reviews as well, but without getting too much into it, I think the bad reviews are coming from a non-gaming standpoint. So if you're into video games, you like video games, you enjoy Harry Potter, this is like 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 levels is what I'm seeing most places, unless you're wired. .com, but we won't go into that. Go check out the Wired review if you want to read an alternate take on Hogwarts Legacy. Moving on to the next story of the week, we had a little indie showcase coming out of PlayStation. Surprisingly, they showcased some little indie titles which we haven't had for quite some time. So in the middle of nowhere, we had a couple of small announcements. We won't dwell too long on them because again, they're just little smaller titles. Pixel Junk Scrappers Deluxe is coming to PlayStation. That was announced this week. It's from Q Games, who again kind of only make Pixel Junk games. It was previously an Apple Arcade exclusive side-scrolling beat 'em up. It sees up to 4 players take the streets of Junktown and use their robo abilities to eliminate anyone that gets in their way. It's got 25 stages across 5 distinct areas and over 100 customizable trucks. And it's coming to PS5 and PS4 later this year. Richie, we've kind of got some history with the Pixel Junk series. Of course, the last one, Pixel Junk Raiders, was a Google Stadia exclusive, and it remains as a Google Stadia exclusive, even after the servers have shut down. So you cannot play that game anymore. So if you're intrigued by Pixel Junk Raiders, there's a first look up on our channel, and no one else can do a first look now because it's gone. But I've got a soft spot for Pixel Junk Raiders. I don't know why. I haven't really spent many hours into the game, but there's something about this Pixel Junk world that this dev team's trying to make. It's like they're committed to this as like a brand for their franchise, and they do variations. The games differ every single time. What do you think of this side-scrolling beat-em-up game? Very I don't want to say Streets of Rage but it kind of is.
It looks fine. Like, if you're into side-scrolling beat-em-ups, I think it's probably worth checking out. But if you're not, it's probably just pass on it. I don't really have that much to say about it, to be honest. Like, I think I know where your like soft spot for Pixel Junk Raiders comes from. It's probably that it was a Stadia exclusive.
Yeah, it's probably not the game itself.
We were shouting out as early adopters of Stadia and late adopters of Stadia, people who experienced the entire life cycle of Google Stadia. We were crying out for any sort of game that would move the needle on Stadia for a long time. So when there was an exclusive, this was a reason to play on that platform. But yeah, I think it looks fine. It looks like a good game. Not for me.
Yeah,
it might be something I would dabble in the stream, but I'm unlikely to play in my own time.
I don't think we will. We got some other titles as well. We got Animal Well. This is from a YouTuber, it's a publishing company, so branched out. It's a Metroidvania style game from a solo developer, shared memory, and it sees players exploring a surreal, beautiful labyrinth filled with animals and secrets. And this is kind of the art style that appeals to me more. One of the things that was kind of the biggest takeaway from this is PlayStation doing like a little indie showcase, because we've not really heard from them for quite some time, and we've spoken a couple of times about when their next big announcement is going to be from PlayStation, and they have we've heard rumors time and time again, and they've circulated this week again that there's going to be some kind of state of play or showcase this year before E3 in June. So they've got this little small window now in springtime. And they've obviously started here with some indie games, but do you think this is like the kind of the calm before the storm, and we finally get to see something from PlayStation?
I really hope so. To be honest, with this indie showcase, I wish they'd actually advertise it a bit more.
I didn't know it happened.
I didn't know it happened until like literally doing my research for the show. Like, it just completely didn't register that this was happening, which is not good when you want it's a showcase. You want people to actually watch it. But I think PlayStation now is far enough away from like God of War where they really need to go. Probably far enough away from PlayStation VR now where they need to go stand up and go, right guys, this is what you should be excited for. Because PlayStation VR seems to review very well, but no one's buying it. So they need to just move on. I think VR will be a slow burn. Just let it be a slow burn, and now time to tell people, without spending an extra 550 quid to buy peripheral, what we can be playing this year, because we don't know. So they really need to.
Yeah, I'm kept busy obviously with Hogwarts Legacy now, and then it'll be Jedi Survivor, and also my child that's due imminently. Rob, any of these indie titles kind of pull out for you, and do you think it sets the tone for a kind of a big reveal showcase? Because Richie's right in saying, like, we don't really know what like, we know we presume Spider-Man 2 is coming this year, but we've not really heard much about it other than the announcements.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's a big kind of void coming up. But on the subject of these kind of indie games, like Pacific Drive looks superb for me. I didn't realise I wanted like a survival driving game, but apparently I do. That's the thing.
Survival driving game. Yeah, so Pacific Drive's a run-based first-person driving survival game, reimagining of Pacific Northwest, where players can gradually explore by restoring and upgrading their trusty car. This is the one coming to PS5 and PC later this year. Yeah, it's probably the most unique.
Yeah, like I don't know why it appeals to me so much, but there's just like, I think it's like the setting and kind of like the creepiness of it, maybe. But that's looking pretty good to me.
You gotta love indie games for just doing such random shit that you wouldn't get in not like this would be just a sidebar of like a random Mad Max game, maybe like get some parts, scavenge, repair your car, fuel it up, and hit the road. But like this being like the main concept of like a cross country journey, it's it's great. It's not a situation you'd want to find yourself in real life. But in the world of a video game, it's like, yeah, like get out there and hunt for it. Very, very interesting.
I can see this like reviewing really well because it does look awesome. It looks really pretty, actually.
Unreal, man. We're going to get a lot of like that's the great thing with this generation. So regardless of if PlayStation ever give us a showcase or not, we know Sony games look fantastic. Without keep returning to Hogwarts Legacy, facial animations nowhere near like the quality of The Last of Us and Naughty Dog stuff and Horizon. Still, like there is still that definitive gap between third-party developers and first-party who get to kind of hone their skills in it. But as we lean into these indie showcases, and then this showcase that hopefully will inevitably drop, third-party game studios and indie developers now have access to such rich tools like Unreal 5. Games for the next like decade, small, medium, or big, are just going to look beautiful. Like, I can't wait to have like these little like two, 3-person teams come out with absolutely gorgeous hits that just lean into the crazy like this Pacific Drive game does.
Yeah, I can't wait to like. It feels like the console generation we're in hasn't really kicked into gear yet, and this is why I think I'm so desperate for PlayStation Showcase. Because when we see what the first party Sony's working on is going to be PS5 exclusive. So these studios have been able to flex the muscles a bit more and not be held back by the fact that they're targeting PS4 as well.
Yeah.
Like, as much as great as God of War Ragnarok was, it isn't a massive step up in terms of how it looks and how it feels to God of War. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's an amazing title, one of the best of all time. But I really want to see like developers now go, okay, we don't need to care about PlayStation 4. We can focus entirely on PS5. What can we do with this better hardware? How far can we push this?
Yeah. How far?
I'm excited for it, man.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Like, we know we're getting Final Fantasy. Forspoken fell off a cliff. I don't think anyone will talk about Forspoken for the rest of the year now.
Yeah,
that's done and gone. We know, again, Marvel Spider-Man 2 may make it out. They're aiming for an autumn, fall launch, but we're not too sure. I just kind of want to know what all the studios are up to. That's the biggest thing for me. Like, Rob, you've got to be like hankering for some Ghost of Tsushima 2 announcements. It's been like this is like 3 years, well, 2.5 detached from Ghost of Tsushima in 2020. It's like, I know that 2 years isn't much, but we must be starting to get into that marketing cycle of it's on the horizon. So you need a PS5 because Ghost 2 it's coming. It's coming.
That's
Ghost
the thing,
2. That's what I want Ghost 2 to be next year.
Yeah,
like,
but
let us know. Yeah, okay, we're working on it. It's coming. Expect this 2024.
Yeah,
like,
there's been like not many big
right.
drops of like this is happening in the distant future. Like we know stuff that's coming in like called the immediate kind of year or whatever, but I need a big carrot to like be hung in front of me soon.
There's a few carrots out there, but we haven't been told when we get to taste these delicious carrots. That's one of the things. Like, when are we getting Spider-Man? When are we getting this? When we're getting that? Like, that's what I want. We need to know more detail on what we already know about, and then them setting up what's coming next as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because we obviously all have our PS5, so it's that marketing campaign. I think we've heard a lot discussed over the last week about PlayStation's earning reports and the revenue stream's bigger than ever, and like that's only kept up by like really pushing home and driving the message that like, no, you want to be in this ecosystem, you want to get on board with this. And as we've said, we've kind of critiqued them a lot for their lack of VR support in terms of marketing, and I genuinely think they've just kind of drew a line under VR and they're like, look, we've done it, the research development, it's produced, it's out there. The devs aren't really making the game seemingly for it, so unless they're about to come out with a big showcase of first party support, I think they're happy to just put all their eggs in the console basket and just push on to what is their strongest thing, which is unfortunately the console.
Well, VR, it's one of them things where for VR to succeed, it needs dev support. You need that first party support. You need to be making experience that are unmissable and not just adaptations of what you've got. You need to go, this game could only work in VR. This is why you should buy it. But I also don't want them to do that because I look at VR as 550 quid peripheral that I'm not that particularly interested in buying. I would rather them focus on developing for what I already have rather than developing in a way to sell me something new. It almost feels like they need another set of Sony first-party developers to work on VR stuff to give me that thing a reason to exist without reducing what they're doing on the PS5.
You don't want to see your output reduced to support something you don't own because it's like, oh, your resources should be going into this. And again, they must have that conversation higher up. Like, do we tell Naughty Dog we need to siphon off a quarter of your team to make an exclusive VR title so we can plaster Naughty Dog's branding over it? Or do they look at it and go, no, Naughty Dog, you do what you do because it works for us and it's making us money and everything else. So it's an interesting business decision. I do think they're going to go hard on this year, but I think, we can all unanimously agree. We just want them to just tell us more. Like, we're hungry for this. Like, we've got the console, we've got some fantastic games coming from third party, like Hogwarts Legacy, like Jedi Survivor. But, like, what are you doing? What are you doing this year? Show me Spider-Man. Show me how good that's going to be that I'm going to be playing possibly this Christmas time. I can't wait.
What is Naughty Dog doing right now?
Last of Us Factions. Like, again, Last of Us came out, and Last of Us Part 2 was 2020, and Ghost of Tsushima was 2020. They've been both quietly working on, inevitably, a sequel. Or, you know what? In the interim, I would take a Ghost of Tsushima Legends, like, standalone game, if, like, that's what they want to work on, and I'll wait for the sequel another 2 or so years. But yeah, Last of Us, whatever that multiplayer, whether it's story focused or not, like, just tell me about it, because this was supposed to be in with the game, and they separate it off. It's been 2.5 years since then now, so tell me more. Showcase is on the horizon, but just as is PSVR 2, our next story of the week kind of leans into the Ubisoft VR world, where the Ubisoft Assassin's Creed VR game has been deep in development. It was being worked on in line with the Oculus Meta. However, because of recent cost cutting over at Meta, getting rid of employees and such, apparently the deal with Ubisoft to make it exclusive for Meta has actually ended, which means there's an Assassin's Creed project titled Nexus for VR, pretty much finished, and it's no longer got a platform to go to. I can see Sony jumping in here and saying, look, tweak it for the PlayStation, bring it out, and apparently behind the scenes reports are saying that they're already working on a sequel, which hopefully is a testament to how good this first game is that we haven't seen much about. Ubisoft's only other entry in VR that I'm aware of is the Eagle Flight game that came out for PSVR 1. I don't know if you saw it, but basically you're a bird and you fly around these beautiful locations that Ubisoft have clearly rendered for Assassin's Creed games, and they took all their assets, moved them over, and they went, you be an eagle, and we'll fly over Paris, we'll fly over London. Again, good concept for VR, something different. However, what does a VR Assassin's Creed game look for you guys? Like, what would you want out of it? Do you want parkour? Do you want jumping? Do you just want stealth kills? Do you want story? Or is it?
It's hard to kind of fathom, because it's hard to know how, like, a parkour system or climbing would work in VR, because, like, the massive limitation of VR is that, like, you are still static in a moving world.
You can get one of them weird treadmill things. That's even more cost.
It's another peripheral.
$2,000 or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's where, like, kind of like other games have kind of developed different combat systems and things like that for. So I'm not sure that would work. I'd be happy with just like a medieval, like, combat game, to be honest.
I think something like For Honor would work really quite well in VR.
Yeah.
I think first person and VR go so well hand in hand, because that's where I think being VR gives that level of immersion that it adds to it. This is what I want from VR, is I want VR to do things that cannot be done without VR. So, like, when I look at some games, as great as some VR titles that are, like something like Moss could easily be done without VR, unfortunately.
Moss should have a non-VR option, because that game's great.
Yeah. So then, for me, it's like, what's the purpose of being VR apart from just the novelty of being in there? I want this to VR Assassin's Creed game to be something that wouldn't work without the VR component. I'm not quite sure what that is. I struggle to imagine that.
Evidently, they're onto something good, though. Yeah. If they're happy to, like, even though this project could have just been scrapped once Meta backed out, and they've went, no, we're actually working on a sequel as well. And that could come from, like, money. Like, if Sony would probably clamber to go to Ubisoft and say, like, look, we've got a fantastic relationship. If the game's finished, like, how much do you want? It helps.
If this is a good game, go like, here's a bag of cash. These are the changes we want you to make, so we can push this as selling the unique features of PSVR. There you go. Make your adaptations. It's going to be PS.
Yeah.
Doesn't even. You could even do it without going the exclusive route. Like, we'll give you the bag of cash. We'll publish it. We'll help you publish it. All you need to do is make these changes. So, like, the inside the head tracking stuff, so where you can look down at your inventory, all that sort of stuff you get in VR too. The adaptive triggers, get all that stuff implemented. Yeah. We'll do it.
Then launch it. And it's an interesting one to think about exclusivity, but, like, the reality is Microsoft and Nintendo do not have a stake in VR.
Yeah, that's why you probably don't need to worry when Sony about making this exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, if it's not going to go on the Oculus, the only real option, maybe HTC still
The
do some
Vive's
stuff.
still about, yeah, I think.
You're still about, then you've got like Steam.
Mm-hmm.
And Sony are less and less looking at PC as a competitor.
Yeah.
And more as just, hey, we can put stuff over there. So
it's a very interesting world that VR's in, because as you said, it's been out to influencers and stuff this past week. They've been allowed to unbox them and take them home to try. And the groundswell I'm hearing from all the people I follow online is that this thing's phenomenal. And it is kind of just underpinned by the games that they are all playing. They're having an absolute blast. I've seen people tweet out saying, like, I think they've found their favorite game, their new favorite game of all time. Like, I'm hearing some very good things coming out of it. But is it still restricted to the cost and the wider library of cost? And I think if they can sort that out,
I think 100%. I look at the specs of the PSVR and go, that looks amazing. I'd love to experience it. But I do worry it's going to be one of them things after a month or two of like, going, this is amazing.
Yeah,
it gets put on a shelf and just collects dust for years.
Yeah, and we've reiterated that time and time again, haven't we?
Yeah,
it's exactly the same. But you know what? If it gets a great launch and it does get a list, like if they do a showcase and they tell us what's on the horizon as well, no pun intended, because Horizon probably is that game people are talking about. It's got something. It's got something. But we'll get back to VR as soon as we start to hear about it. It can't be long. It's the 22nd, right? So we're 10 days at the time of recording out from the full launch, and I'm very curious to just see how it's received in the wider world and how many people genuinely. Because I don't think we're going to see many sales, but just if it came out and did bad and the games were shit and the VR wasn't as great as it was touted as, then it would just be dead in the water. But if it does come out and it gets stellar reviews and the journalists and the press seem to love it and the games are like, everyone's saying, you've got to experience this, you've got to experience it, that at least sets it on the right trajectory for potentially, like when it's on a Black Friday sale later this year and there's a couple more games out, that could bring me in at maybe a little bit later. But we do have to wait for that. So in the meantime, we'll talk about PUBG. And Krafton, the company that owns it, of course, they just recently released the Callisto Protocol. Is also one of their spin-off studios. So we've got the PUBG team, we've got Krafton, and apparently they are launching a new AAA game studio, which we did have some insight to. A couple of weeks back, we actually discussed this, but the Bird That Drinks Tears Korean fantasy book, they did a kind of a concept project trailer for this game, and I think we both gushed over it and thought, this looks fantastic. The concept is fantastic. Krafton have came out this past week and confirmed that they're going to launch a brand new studio to essentially make this unannounced project, this plan to adapt this story in this game. And they've recruited head of leadership team with 20 years experience from Ubisoft, game director Patrick. It looks like his name says Meth. No offense, Patrick, but your surname looks like it's just called Meth. Meth there, it's probably French or something. But they've recruited him and a bunch of new game directors, studios, head of technology to essentially kickstart this adventure in Montreal up in Canada. Richie, you're going there later this year, right?
Potentially,
yeah. You can go pop in and say hello from Helix Plays Games. But essentially, the studio's first project is going to be the Bird That Drinks Tears adaptation. What do we think of this then? So Callisto Protocol came out. It reviewed okay. It didn't quite hit, I think, the Dead Space numbers that they were expecting. But you know what? For a new IP, first attempt, brand new studio, I'll accept it. It's leaps and bounds better than PUBG graphically and gameplay wise, and the fact that they're committing to seemingly what's going to be like a single player, potentially Dark Souls experience, I'm down for that. Obviously we're probably quite some years out now, but any additional thoughts on them committing to this and creating a whole new studio and definitely putting that PUBG money to good use seemingly?
The only thing I'm disappointed about by this news is the fact that it's happening now and didn't happen in the past, so this game's further out than I was hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's good. Beyond that, I think this is just good news. The game looks like it could be a potentially awesome game, but it is, again, I think it is now definitely going to be 2026 or something, realistically, if they're still building the studio that's going to work on it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just happy to see obviously, like, every week we cover, like, tech layoffs and kind of industry kind of downsizing and things like that. So to see, like, a new studio essentially being born from nothing it's quite nice, like, in these kind of times, really.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I think it's a clever move that they obviously had huge success with PUBG, like unprecedented success, and it set the tone for what became Fortnite and Warzone and everything else. And they didn't really hold their own with that because of essentially the size of the studio when PUBG exploded. They didn't have the staff on the books to actually keep making the game as good as it was, whereas Epic and Activision did. So they could pivot and tweak and amend and update and add things to their games, whereas PUBG kind of struggled to keep up with the pace. They couldn't keep up with the success based on how small they were.
The bigger players moved into space and just kind of pushed them out of it a bit.
It's your
PUBG
atypical...
is still alive today,
yeah.
but it's not... When you look at it, it's going up against Call of Duty Warzone, it's going up against Fortnite, these kind of
Legends,
just pushed...
yeah.
Apex Legends, like...
It is,
and every other battle royale that comes and fails. Like,
it is that capitalism 101 of like, you've got something good, we have money though, so we're going to take that idea and put millions more into it and just inevitably produce something that's more polished and finished and such.
As much as we kind of talk about like Fortnite in terms of like the battle royale genre, PUBG has its place in gaming history.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there's no Fortnite battle royale without PUBG.
No.
It's straight up. So what Fortnite became, that phenomenon, doesn't exist without PUBG first. So Krafton will always have that line in the video game history as one of the most important games of all time.
And like PUBG is one of those games that's out of the battle royale genre. It's probably the one I've enjoyed and played the most of.
Yeah.
Enough. Well, like we should probably get around to doing Warzone at some point on the channel. But
we should do.
In the meantime, like I enjoyed it. But what I do love to see is that they've made their money, and I just love the fact that they're reinvesting into the parts of the industry that I like, which is single player, seemingly content of AAA games. And they could have just took the money and ran with it. They could have took the money and just pumped it back into PUBG, and they've went, no, we've got Callisto Protocol off the back of this now, which again, for its sins, is a great game for a new IP. Like, will the sequel be better? Undoubtedly. Hope it gets greenlit. And then we get this. If this spawns like a trilogy of games based in this novel, this world, then I'm down for it. Whereas this could have just been PUBG 2. So, like, that I'm all, as a gamer, I'm all down for them diverging their portfolio and bringing more titles and games to the world. So, good on you, Krafton. Good on you. Speaking of bringing constant things to the world, we'll pivot over to another massive capitalist company in the form of EA, and they are close to negotiating a £500 million deal with the English Barclays Premier League. Richie, you're the one currently dabbling in the world of FIFA. We know, we've spoke about it many times on this show, that EA have fell out with the FIFA football governing body for the world over. The greedy bastards wanting some more money from EA just to put the word FIFA on the box, just to put FIFA on the game. No input, no creative input, anything like that. Just the pure branding aspect. And EA went, no, that's enough. The deal's over. We've been with you for several decades now. It's over. But it looks like they're now going out to individual leagues to hone in on licensing, player likeness, and sponsorship deals. 488 million for the Barclays Premier League. Is that short change for the Premier League, or is that a good deal all round?
I don't like this number. The main reason is I hate...
You can round up to 500 if you don't like 488.
Yeah, I hate Ultimate Team. I hate its concept. And for me, I always look at every single year, I look at it and go, the EA Sports puts the basic, absolute minimum effort into career mode, which is the best mode, and put absolutely tons in Ultimate Team. Is like... But it's numbers like this is why they have to do it. Because they need to pay this bill. So that is an unfortunate situation. So if it's going to be 500 million for the Premier League plus however hundreds of millions for the Bundesliga and for League One and for the Italian leagues and so on and so forth, you're probably talking well over like $1 billion to get all the leagues.
It is,
and that
crazy.
Means they're going to have to sell some digital trading cards.
Yeah, it is. Again, EA make a lot of money from FIFA alone, but it's interesting. Like, this year's
they've got
FIFA
this bill to pay. They have to make a lot of money to pay this bill.
This year's FIFA will not be called. It's going to be called EA Sports FC. So that's going to be interesting when kind of August, September comes around. But then, they now have to go and individually negotiate. So it's just this is just for one league. Obviously, it's the biggest league in the world. However, is there a chance by the time September comes around, Richie, you're playing a version of FIFA that doesn't have the French top leagues, doesn't have the Champions League, doesn't have League 2 Scottish League or whatever? And does that matter? Does that impact the sales of the game, or do people just bite the bullet and go, it's FIFA's
Well,
fault.
For me, it does matter because they need to be better than before. If they come out and they're missing leagues or this weird got Tottenham, London Whites versus London Reds and stuff like that, and there's the players that don't have the proper names and stuff, is like they could go the way of Pro Evo. Like,
I don't think
Pro
EA
Evo,
would let that happen, but yeah, you're right. There is that inherent risk.
I don't
of
think
that.
I'd be, as someone who does play career mode, I want them to improve career mode, not make it worse, which means they need to at least have all the licensing that they have now in place, and then improve the game on top of that.
I'd be interested to see behind the scenes, because you've got to imagine FIFA kind of trying to put a stop to this. Like, FIFA must be going to the clubs and saying, like, we're the governing body, you have to make a deal with us. And then the clubs independently go, well, we're also part of the Premier League. Like, there's a lot of different, like, tiers of, like, who owns who and who's part of what kind of business practices and parties, and hence why they're trying to do a breakaway league now, even though they weren't allowed to legally, but they're going to do it anyway, and vice versa. But purely from a business lens, Rob, FIFA have said they're going to go away and partner with someone to make their own FIFA game. FIFA obviously have the license and the overarching thing for the leagues. They govern the sport. But then independently, the Barclays Premier League is its own independent business that makes money, makes trades, and has the sponsorship and likeness. And it's such an odd structure, but at the end of the day, people pay 100 million for a human being in this sport. So
it's like, yeah, like applying any sort of logic or like real life kind of thinking to professional
the numbers
football
are stupid.
is just,
They're not realistic numbers.
yeah, but like it's just, the thing is, like, EA had a really good thing going and FIFA had a really good thing going, and now one party is either taking the piss or one party has not accepted the piss or whatever. Like,
let's be realistic here. It's probably both sides taking the piss out of each other. Both sides are trying to be a bit more greedy than the other, and it's just broken their relationship.
Yeah, to the point where I think both products, whatever they turn out to be, will be lesser versions. Like, FIFA's game's going to be a big risk, right? And then EA's kind of, what the hell people are calling now is like,
there's only ever been two players in like making football games, EA and Konami have just fallen apart massively.
Yeah, like, who else do you get to make a football game?
So it's someone new, so it's probably 2K maybe. They've got experience in sports.
Yeah, but if you played some 2K games, geez, it's like their NBA like titles are like garbage, especially career mode. Career mode's like a running meme for like for NBA 2K.
Get who was it, Ukes, who made that terrible WWE game for them? And just like it was so buggy and glitchy. It was like it was taken from off-store shells.
I'm struggling to think of who FIFA could partner with. Maybe like a Ubisoft might have taken a punt, but at the moment they seem to be consolidating their catalogue a bit. It's such a weird one. It doesn't seem the right time for them.
Because obviously FIFA have a lot of money, but it's such a risk. Like, they could just launch it and it does nothing. And EA have a lot of risk, but they have the experience. They have decades of like shitting these games out every single year. And like you said, Richie, they make money, and inherently by sport, it's a seasonal based thing. So a yearly iteration of a sports game fits in perfectly with a yearly seasonal sport that happens where no season's ever alike. So it's just, I hate to think of a world where we go into it and we like, hopefully this means we get more leagues, because if they're negotiating independently, they can go to just anyone and say, can we have your branding, your likeness, and your playlist, and we'll put them in the game. And then clubs are going to snap people's fingers off for that.
It could be great for actually lower leagues who are not going to, they have now a chance to like basically pitch themselves and go, you know what, you can get us. We might get a bit of a bigger cut of the pie here. That could be beneficial for lower leagues in terms of the real world.
Yeah,
because that money will potentially transfer to the clubs.
Absolutely.
So it could help. It could also go the other way, where EA look at it and go, we don't want to pay for you.
Yeah, so we could lose.
We've looked at the stats. Less than 1% of players even bother playing League One or below. So we're just not going to bother with them.
Well, let's face it, Wrexham was in this year's FIFA 23. and they're
Because
they're
of
outside
their
of
owners.
that National League. It's purely down to they've gone to Ryan Reynolds or whoever and negotiated, and they've went, we want to be in the game. So you have to go to the other world section.
Rest of world.
And rest of world, and Wrexham are in there, and it's like, if they can get away with it. But it's so weird how like the negotiation works with like likeness and certain clubs and deals and branding and sponsorship and copyrights, and it's a whole legal mess.
Very complex.
Very complex. But apparently 500 million is on the card for the Barclays Premier League. It's a lot of money, but it would only get you half of it would get you 5 Jack Grealishes, basically. So if you want 5 human beings with shiny legs, then yeah, you can get in on that. Moving on to some final stories of the week. Siphon Filter, I just want to mention that, is apparently coming to PlayStation Plus on PS5 with trophies. The best Siphon Filter, we know we've had a few of them. Dark Mirror, which is apparently supposed to be the best Siphon Filter game, is coming with trophy support indeed. So that's some more games coming to your PlayStation Plus catalogue. And we do also have City Skylines Remastered coming this week to PS5 owners. If you own the game on PS4, you get a free upgrade. However, it is going free on Game Pass, so if you've got an Xbox, go enjoy it for free out there. When you check out the XPass podcast, which went live yesterday, we round up all the Xbox news with Richie as your host and me and Rob joining him in tandem. Does he call the channel Helix Plays Games? Yes, he does, but he's a bit tired on the morning. Don't forget, everyone, the ClickerCast is not live tonight because HBO snuck us out an early episode because of the Super Bowl, one of those other giant sports franchises that has ridiculous money where they trade human beings for sport. But we'll be back next Tuesday, 8 p.m. live GMT, where we round up every episode of The Last of Us, broken down review, talking about the characters, what's going on, the plot, etc. And just as a quick snippet, because we haven't recorded it yet, because we're doing it on the Sunday, episode 5, Endure and Survive, is up live on the channel now. Go check that out. We've all watched the episode, correct?
Yes.
Rob, on this show, we usually ask for your thoughts after the fact, but we've actually got you ahead of time now. So, in a weird twist of time, back to Richie's Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy crazy time loop that he's created. Just quick overview thoughts before we round up the show?
Like, the one criticism I've seen of the show, the one criticism that made sense, was that there wasn't as much action as some people were expecting. Mm-hmm. You will be fine this episode. 100% fine. And also for anybody who's played the game, they know what's coming from like the last scene of episode 4.
Oh yeah.
Damn.
It delivers. It delivers.
It does. I welled up twice, I think, during it. I didn't cry, but I welled up. I got very close to it twice. Richie, how about you? Quick snapshot thoughts?
Pretty much echo what Rob said. This is more action focused, but I think the action maybe lands a bit stronger because it hasn't been saturated by it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, I want some. Oh, here's some good action as well. There's someone at my door.
You go get the door. I'll round out the show. We don't need say bye to everyone. Say bye to everyone.
Bye everyone.
There goes Richie. He'll be back, of course, on the ClickerCast XPass as well, and this week's Thursday night live stream. Who do you think is at his door, Rob? Who do you think is at his door? Who could it be?
Maybe it's his optician who's doing the house visit.
He's booked. Yeah, so we have to round out our recordings early this week because Richie has to go for an optician's appointment, and I would love it if it was like a house call.
He's just booked it incorrectly.
And he's telling us that we need to round out the show so he can go, and realistically they're just there with his new pair of glasses, just ready to deliver it there and then. But that has been all for this week's Talking the PS episode number 35. Thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you very much to our Helix heroes who, of course, support us that extra bit further. And if you've enjoyed the show, if you enjoy any of our content...
I'm Richie and I'm back.
Who was it, Richie?
Who was it?
It was actually a representative from Marvel Snap because I love that game so much.
Guy. We thought it might have been your optician.
No, it was definitely Marvel
but
Snap
that's been it.
I'm a huge fan.
We don't know what you booked.
Sometimes they do now.
House calls for old people, right? But yes, shout out to our Helix heroes. You're all wonderful and awesome. Thank you very much for your support. And if you want to support us that extra bit further, click join below on YouTube. 99p gets you early access to this very show, plus stickers and badges next to your name in the chat and other exclusive content. Thank you very much for joining me. My name's been Chris.
And I've been Marvel Snap Lover Richie.
And I've been Rob.
We've been Talking the PS. And remember, folks, play whatever makes you the happiest. We'll see you next week. Take care. Goodbye.